I'd like to announce our next speaker. As many of you probably know, just a few weeks ago, the Swiss regulator FINMA updated their regulatory approach towards ICOs. They issued the ICO guidelines. I'm thrilled to announce today that one of the leading experts on the legal side of what this really means for blockchain companies and cryptocurrency companies is with us today. Andreas Glarner is at MME. He's structured the Ethereum crowdfunding event, and MME has been very active for the past 4 years in the ICO space. Please welcome, with a big applause, Andreas Glarner, partner at MME Legal. Enjoy.
Well, thank you for the kind introduction. I'm very glad to be here today. I remember when I was on stage at the ICO summit last November I was talking about the current regulatory uncertainties we face in Switzerland. We didn't really know how to proceed with the ICOs, the token-generating events lacking clear guidelines and guidance of FINMA after they have released their press release in late September. So it was kind of a period of stalling the projects. And now we're back on track. And I'm very happy to be able to say that. I'm very happy that FINMA released in February its guidelines on ICOs. I'll be using the next 15 minutes to present you the content of those. Obviously, 15 minutes is not that much time. I also want to leave room for some questions from the audience, if there are any. So we can kind of quickly go through what the guidelines are. I can say up front, there are guidelines. That means they're guiding through certain questions, but they don't answer all the questions. So there's still going to be many open issues which are going to be needed to be clarified in the future. We and others are in close discussions with FINMA on a project case-by-case level to see how we solve things. So if we move on, that's more or less how it looked like in the past months, and now we can fill this framework with content based on FINMA guidelines. Basically what FINMA does, FINMA distinguishes 3 types of token. We're going to have the payment token, we have the utility token, and the asset token. And what we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 minutes, the approach of FINMA, while being functional, is mainly result-driven. So what FINMA did, out of the whole ecosystem of token functionalities, which is obviously much bigger than just 3 tokens, it crystallized out 3 different types, which then are tied and assigned to specific sets of regulations. So if you look at the 3 tokens, we have the payment token. Payment token is considered by FINMA a means of payment token, which shall be used to settle transactions, and not necessarily transactions between the issuer and the contributor or a third party, but between users of certain technology. By way of example, FINMA refers to Bitcoin as a payment token. It also refers to Ether as a payment token, while I think at the time of launching the payment token, it was more of a utility function there. But at the end of the day, payment tokens are all the tokens which are tended to be a mean of settlement on transactions. Utility token, that's a mean of accessing an application, a protocol. It has a mere access functionality. And the asset token, that's a big basket with all counterparty-based tokens. So if the token has a right to certain revenue streams, a cash flow, or a similar right, then FINMA would qualify that as an asset token. Right. And as I said, FINMA ties those kind of tokens, those type of tokens, into different kinds of regulations. So principally, when we look at payment tokens, we need to check whether AML regulations are applicable. If you look at the utility token, as a matter of principle, with exceptions, no regulations apply, and with regard to asset tokens, security regulations may apply when you issue those tokens. We also need to take into account that one token can fall into various different categories. So It could be that a token is at the same time a utility token as well as an asset token. So we have to look at different regulations. What FINMA also does, it distinguishes between four different types of development stages. And that's very important, as we'll see for the regulatory assessment at the end. We have the pre-financing round. Pre-financing meaning that there's no token around. It's more likely an early contribution or a contribution based on a soft agreement, as we see. So there's actually no token issuance at that stage. We have voucher token. Voucher token are tokens which need to be converted to another token in the later stage. We quite often see that in protocol developments, where obviously, for technical reasons, you can't issue a token for a new protocol to be developed prior to the protocol existing. Thus, you would launch a token on a different protocol, an ERC20 token, for example, have a conversion mechanism in some way where at the end of the day you can convert it to the real token, the final token at the end. Then we have the pre-operational token. Pre-operational, within the meaning on the understanding of FINMA, is a token where you're already running on the final protocol. For example, an ERC20 token for an application which runs on the Ethereum protocol, but the application is not yet developed or not yet fully operational. And final, that's clear, it's an operational token. Thus, you have the protocol ready, you have the application ready, everything is working at the time of issuance of the token. And thus, if you look at this framework, we have the different categories of token on the one hand and the different development stages. We can kind of do an exercise to allocate token types in a particular development stage to a particular set of regulations. As again, it's kind of FINMA guidelines in a nutshell. There's a bit more to it, but not that much, actually. So if I look at the payment token first, what FINMA says, if we have a payment token, if someone launches as part of an ICO a payment token, which is operational or pre-operational, we need to comply with anti-money laundering regulations. I'll get to what that actually means in the second phase. If you launch a payment token which is still in a voucher phase, the guidelines don't give an answer what that actually means. We are of the opinion, but that's still going to be seen whether FINMA shares that opinion, that both voucher and pre-financing is not subject to AML regulations because the issuance of the token which shall be used as a mean of payment is quite far away. It's not even the same token. Respectively, there's no token around at all, which could be a mean of payment. If you look at the utility token, with regard to pre-financing, no regulations apply. So if you don't issue a token, that's no regulations if it's a utility token. If it's an operational token, so you already have an application up and running when you issue the token, there's also a utility token, no regulations apply. We get to the part in the middle there, the voucher and the pre-operational one at the very end. With regard to security regulations, pre-financing, if there's no token, there can't be any tradable security, thus security regulations do not apply. But if we have an operational token, a pre-operational token, or a voucher token, security regulations may apply. And here, the question marks in the middle. According to FINMA, if you launch a pre-operational token or a token in a voucher phase, that's a token which needs to be converted at the later stage, even though if it's a utility token, FINMA says that security regulation may apply because they say it may qualify as an asset token. Here, there's some space to maneuver because it's not clear how much development work needs to be done until there's more of a utility type token and how much development work can be done before it kind of moves from the asset token phase to the utility token phase. I think what we know already now is that if you have a beta version running on a testnet, for example, so not on a real a live net environment, FINMA would likely not qualify that to be sufficient to be an operational utility token. They're likely to say, well, no, you're still pre-operational, we qualify your token as asset token. So this is the broad framework of those regulations which FINMA applies. And the good news is it does not only help us how to guide you through an ICO process, because we know what kind of regulations are applicable. The good news is also we know that we can live with these regulations. We can set up appropriate AML regulations in order for you to comply with that. And FINMA gives two possibilities for that. One, of course, is the classical approach, where you say, I'm going to be a financial intermediary based on Swiss law, thus I need to comply with AML regulations, which means I need to join a self-regulatory organization. For you, those of you who are not familiar with Swiss AML regulations, basically self-regulatory organizations are entities which are supervised by FINMA and which have been granted the right to supervise financial intermediaries. So you can do that. You can join a self-regulatory organization. You can then comply with the regulations by doing the appropriate due diligence, and then you can run with that. The other approach would be that you outsource the financial intermediary activity in full to a regulated financial intermediary. So a service provider which has been licensed as a financial intermediary would take over this responsibility of accepting the funds and doing the due diligence work for you, and thus you don't have to bother doing it yourself. So that would be the second option of that. With regard to security regulations, here there are obviously different kind of securities. It could be an equity security, a share, or a derivative. There, you would have a prospectus duties, but most tokens which qualify as a security are likely to qualify as uncertificated securities, so-called Wertrechte in German. And the issuance of those uncertificated securities is not regulated in Switzerland, which means there's no prospective duties. If you issue it yourself, you don't have to do any particular license requirements. You don't have to meet that. But what is regulated is the secondary market. Thus, if you're intending to exchange security token, asset token, if you want to deal with that on behalf of another party, if you want to issue that as a service provider, because you take over the AML responsibilities for an issuing company, then you need to have a security trading license. Yes, so basically, in a nutshell, AML regulations, they can be met quite easily. Security regulations, you don't need to be concerned if you're issuing the security yourself. What does that mean on a project side? I think we have two approaches. We have one approach is the purely Swiss regulatory approach, meaning we look at the token, we classify it. Is it a payment token? Is it a utility token or an asset token? We look what kind of development stage it has at the time of issuance, and out of that we can conclude what kind of set of regulations you need to comply with and what are your duties to meet before you launch a token. But that's only one part of the story. The other part of the story is that you're likely going to be issuing your token on a very global scale. You want to have distribution partners, maybe in Asia, maybe you want to have US participants, and for that, we do advise to have not only the FINMA classification in mind, but to have a more functional approach and look what is out of the, let's say, 20 or so different possible blockchain crypto assets property functions, which function does your token meet? And out of that, you go into a particular jurisdiction you want to engage in. If you want to set up a distribution channel and look, do I have this token function in this particular jurisdiction I want to engage? Do I have particular sets of law to comply with? And based on this left side, which is a more functional approach, you can do the global regulatory assessment. So we always advise to do both assessment, not only the FINMA one, but to look a bit beyond the borders of Switzerland to also see what is the token function and what regulatory implications would it have outside Switzerland in particular jurisdictions you're focusing in. Yes, I think my time is almost up. If there are any questions from the audience, I'm very happy to answer them. Yes?
Which legal entity should issue the tokens? An AG, a Stiftung, GmbH, or a Stiftung in Liechtenstein or Switzerland?
That's a good question. The question was which legal entity is best suitable to launch a token? If it's an AG or a foundation, or it should be Liechtenstein or Switzerland. Obviously, the FINMA guidelines, they apply to Switzerland and not to Liechtenstein. Liechtenstein is a very valid option, though, in any case, which are different kind of regulations, but also very suitable for token issuance. The question, what kind of structure would be best, that applies to all jurisdictions, obviously. And we always say a foundation only makes sense when you intend to launch a technology which needs to be maintained and developed for a long period of time, like the base layer technologies, protocols, which other people build their verticals, their applications upon them. So you're going to have a big community which relies on the technology in the future, and then a foundation structure which is very solid, makes a lot of sense, similar to a Linux foundation, for example, that those people can rely that there's sufficient funding that the development of this base layer, the protocol layer, will continue for a very long time. If you, however, have a vertical an application built on another protocol, they mostly have a rather commercial focus. And for commercial activities, foundations are not too suitable. Yes?
Question about a token linked to it.
Question regarding a token linked to a collectible. I would call it an asset token, but not a security token. How would that fit in that scheme, and what would you advise?
You mean kind of like a token, an asset-backed token, kind of?
Yeah, backed by some work of art, representing a limited edition license to access the content.
I think the question there is how the token is being backed. Is it a relative right, a claim to something in an asset, or is it an absolute right? Is it property which a token represents? And if it's property, it's an absolute right, you're lacking a counterparty. And thus, I would definitely share your approach that it shouldn't be an asset token. The FINMA guidelines address that, remain a bit vague and say they may also be asset tokens, but there's something to be cleared. If it's a mere claim and not a property right represented by the token, I think FINMA will qualify it as asset token.
According to structure, what do you think about the combination of a foundation and an AG to combine the advantages of both to have more flexibility in the long run?
I think such hybrid structures can make a lot of sense. I think the question is what kind of purpose do you remain to have in a foundation? That could be the main protocol development, and then you could have a subsidiary or an entity related to the foundation which has certain commercial benefits. Obviously, as soon as a foundation has a subsidiary with a commercial focus, that needs to be approved by the supervising authorities. Yeah.
One last question?
Yes, thanks. Hey, so I didn't quite understand that Swiss distribution here on depending on the development stage, but you say Swiss distribution. What does that mean exactly?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Sorry, so you have here the distribution on the bottom, and it says CH, right? On the top.
It's an abbreviation of Switzerland.
Sorry?
It's for Switzerland. CH stands for Switzerland.
Yes, but does that mean that the issuance of the tokens has to happen physically from Switzerland?
Well, no, it means that sorry, it's a bit unclear. Yes, I agree. I could have explained that better. The right side focuses on Switzerland. So the question on the FINMA analysis, which we do above the payment utility asset and development stage, then the question is, what are the regulatory consequences for the distribution as well as the token issuance in Switzerland? So those are the questions which we can answer out of this classification model. Okay. All right. Thank you for listening. So if any more questions arise, I'll be happy to have a chat on the side.